Welcome to the Startup Grind.
So welcome to the second event of Startup Grind. This is a monthly event. Every month we're going to change the venue and the speaker. This month it is Sutanto, I'm not even going to try your last name. Widjaja. Flew in from Bay Area. You can introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely, yeah. So hello everyone, my name is Sutanto Widjaja. So I'm actually currently a portfolio manager for an investment firm called TIA Craft. So for some of you guys who have parents who are professors or teachers, you should be familiar with the organization. And I specialize mostly in healthcare and technology investments. I've been doing that for the last 14 years. But at the same time, for the last maybe 2 or 3 years, I have also been pretty active with the Berkeley Angel Network, which is an angel group in San Francisco. And the Berkeley Angel Network is an alumni group out of UC Berkeley. And what we do is that we finance startup companies. We have 4 events a year. And in between each of these events, my job is to go out and meet with accelerators and companies and startup companies to try to recruit them to apply to us in our quarterly events. And I do have some entrepreneurial experience myself as well. About maybe almost like 15 years ago, I co-founded a biotech startup called Sutro Biopharma with a professor at Stanford. And I licensed his technology out of his lab to start a company, help raise more than almost $100 million of venture financing, and hire a new CEO to run that company. So I've gone through the trials and tribulations of what it's like to start a company and going through the process of frustration as well as uncertainty as well. So that's kind of a little bit background about myself and the extent of entrepreneurial experience that I have.
And then how did you switch over from being an entrepreneur to becoming an investor?
Yeah. So the straight answer to that was I became an investor at TIA Craft because I got recruited by my friend. And at that point in time, they were looking for somebody who specializes in healthcare investments. And coincidentally, I had that match because I started a biotech company before. So that's how I got into the field of investment. But what I've been doing for TIA Craft has been mostly public investments. So what that means is investing in large, publicly traded companies where information is very transparent, and these companies are typically companies that have a lot of large revenue streams and are profitable already. But I came from an entrepreneurial family myself. My dad was an entrepreneur who started from zero to creating his own plantation in Indonesia several decades ago. So deep down in my veins, I've always been very entrepreneurial, and I wanted to do something startup related. So because of that, 3 years ago, when I learned about this Berkeley Angel Investment Group, I decided to join them because there's an opportunity for me to not only invest my own personal money, but also to work with entrepreneurs as well. So that's my main driver.
Can you talk a little bit more about the Berkeley Angels and why they would be interested in Hawaii companies?
Yeah, sure. So the Berkeley Angel Group, as I mentioned to you, is an alumni group. Has about anywhere between 250 to 300 members. Most of the members in the group are either former executives or former venture capitalists. There's some members of the groups who are former entrepreneurs themselves who have exited from their companies but don't want to or refuse to retire and still want to be involved in something entrepreneurial. So that's sort of the profile that you see in the Berkeley Angel Group. And initially when we started the Berkeley Angel Group, one of the things that we wanted to do was to be supportive and to promote companies that come out of UC Berkeley, right? Because we're alumni of the organization, we wanted to make sure that we support the innovations that come out of campus. But eventually what we realized was that the volume of deal flow is simply not enough if we just rely on one campus. So we then decided to open up the application to pretty much anybody and any startup companies that are qualified who want to apply to us. Now, as I'm sure most people have known, either some people who have traveled to California, been to California, live in California, or read from the media, we are somewhat in a tech boom right now in California, specifically in Silicon Valley. For the last couple of years, most of the deal flow that we have seen have come from the Bay Area. Right? And because of the boom, the tech boom that we have seen, one of the biggest issues that's occurred for investors such as ourselves is that the valuations have increased quite dramatically within Silicon Valley because there's a lot of competition. There's a lot of money in the Bay Area chasing for very few good deals. So valuations are very high. So that's one of the primary reasons why, as a member of the Angel Group, I wanted to help diversify away from the Silicon Valley. We've seen back in 2000, there was a technology burst, right? And in 2008, 2009, there's also a market collapse as well. So one of the things that I want to avoid for the Berkeley Angel is to have too much of our investments in the San Francisco Bay Area because we don't want that kind of dependency. And also, I also personally believe that there's somewhat of a valuation bubble. So I'm trying to look for investment opportunities outside of the Bay Area in hope to search for companies, good companies that have reasonable valuations, right? So that's one of the reasons why, as I travel, I've been to Vancouver or Honolulu and visited a couple of accelerators and trying to source deals outside of the Bay Area to introduce more diversity to our group and also hopefully to get better valuations as well.
So of all the places that you've been, why Hawaii? What are some of the advantages and disadvantages that you see here?
Yeah. So in terms of why Hawaii, the honest truth is because I come to Hawaii 5 times a year personally for vacation. So that's more for selfish reasons more than anything else. But what's interesting is that I have, over the last year, gotten to know Sarah, Carl Fuchs, and the work that they've done at Hawaiian Strategic Development Corporation, I think, and also got introduced to the Blue startups as well. So what I've learned is that there is actually a very vibrant entrepreneurial community in the Honolulu area. There's also a lot of support by various organizations to try to promote entrepreneurship within the Hawaiian community as well, right? So that's, to me, is very inspirational, and I really is very attracted to that. And I also strongly believe one thing that people like Sarah and Carl has told me, and that is they're trying to help the state to diversify the economy outside of tourism and the defense industry, right, which are basically the 2 drivers in driving the economy in Hawaii. So I think I really very much buy into the long-term vision into wanting to diversify the economy of Hawaii. But I also think that there's a lot of very smart people as well, mentors, especially as I see from the work that Blue Startups have done. There are actually a lot of very sophisticated investors and mentors from California who have done well and decided to relocate to Hawaii, right? And a lot of these people are very driven people. They will never retire, until the day before they die. They will never retire. They always want to continue to work. And I see that they are adding a lot of value to the whole Hawaiian ecosystem, either through Hawaiian Angels as well as the Blue Startups. So I'm feeling a lot of confidence that there's a lot of an ecosystem of not only capital, but also mentorship within the Honolulu Hawaiian community. So because of those factors, and as an investor, I have to be long-term, and I can't see what's going to happen in the next year. I want to see what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. So I foresee that with all these various factors, the capital and the increasing mentorship within here, I can see that there's a lot of opportunities for entrepreneurial ventures here.
So in terms of entrepreneurial ventures, Hawaii in the innovation and tech sector, we're not as developed as the Bay Area.
Right.
So much of that economy is still, the backbone of it is, brick and mortar, mom and pop shops. Many of them have never even really known about raising money with a VC firm or anything of that sort. Depending, how would you give them advice in terms of like raising money, banks versus angels versus investors versus friends and family? what is the difference? When is the right decision for what type of company? If you can break that down a little bit more, that'd be great for this audience here.
Yeah. So, one thing that, and this is a fallacy that I fell into myself as well when I was younger, and I always thought that the sexiest, biggest companies that you've heard of, the Googles and Facebook of the world, you have to, in order to grow into a big, powerful company like that, you have to go and get venture financing, right? But that's actually not true, right? And if you look at business history, historically, most of the most successful businesses, traditional businesses in America, are actually not funded by venture financing, right? I mean, if you look at the clothing in the retail industry, for example, or many of the brick and mortars industry, many of the traditional, increasingly even some of the software companies, where in today's world market, the cost of starting business is actually very low. Being successful doesn't always mean that you have to align yourself with a Kleiner Perkins or the Sequoia Capital of the world, right? So I want to make sure that people have that notion of their mind, right? So let's think about the various sources of capital, right? So you mentioned, in my mind, there are maybe 4 or 5 sources of key capital. First one is obviously friends and family. The other one is angel financing. And then another one is bank financing. And another one is venture financing. And then the last one that people actually don't think about a lot is actually government financing, right? There's one source of financing that many entrepreneurs, they kind of miss out. You have to do a lot of research. There's actually a lot of financing for that. So let's think about what type of companies or what stage of company you need to be in order for you to approach each of these various kinds of financing. So let's talk about friends and family, right? I think that the critical lifeblood of any sort of capitalism, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, is actually friends and family, right? And you can see not only in American capitalism, but when you look at entrepreneurship in other parts of the world, in most initial seed financing that most people get, generally in other parts of the world, in most part of America, it's actually friends and family, right? Because there are the people who knows you best and who believe in you, and quite frankly, when you're starting out, you have no track record, when you have no track record of success, the only real investment thesis is you, right? Let alone the business plan or whatnot is you, right? And then equally important, when you go to raise money from non-friends and family, when you go out to angel financiers, for example, like for me, when I'm assessing a lot of companies that come to get angel financing from me, I always like to ask one of the favorite questions, right? Did you borrow money from your grandmother to finance the company initially, right? And then that is a very important question, because the answer to that question shows that individual's level of conviction, right? If he's willing to risk his grandmother's money to start a company, that really demonstrates a lot about his level of conviction in his idea, right? And if he's not willing to risk his grandmother's money, or if he's not willing to risk his own money, why should I risk my money into investing in your company, right? So I often, this is sort of my first smell test all the time, right? Is whether that individual has really raised friends and family financing. Now let's think about what is the purpose of friends and family financing, right? Typically, most of the models I've seen is that people raise friends and family financing for what I call a proof of concept, right? You always have an idea, you're excited about it, but you really need to prove it even before you go out and raise any sort of angel financing or venture financing, right? I think very frequently we all hear about all these great stories about how in Silicon Valley people raise venture financing with a concept on a napkin, right? That doesn't happen to everyday people like us. That only happens to proven entrepreneurs, right? Second or third time entrepreneurs. Or that happens to people who have some sort of reputation within their field of expertise, right? They're very deep in their expertise, they're well known, and I was talking to one of your colleagues here, as in the case of developing biotech companies, right? If you're a professor at MIT who knows breast cancer really well for 30 years, and that's all you know, and you've published in all the major publications, yes, you will be able to get venture financing very quickly, right? Even without financing from your grandmother, right? So I would say that friends and family is the absolute first phase of financing you would get. And that's valuable capital because these are people that that you love, right? And you want to make sure that they get money back. So I would strongly recommend that the way you would use your capital is for what I call proof of concept, right? Prove it up. Does a market really exist for my idea? Who's going to pay for it? How much are they willing to pay for it? Right? These are some of the very simple questions that you need to address. So once you address that, then the second round of financing could be either from bank financing or angel financing. And I say either or because depending on the types of businesses that you start, you may not even need any angel financing at all, right? Bank financing can be very come into handy, especially for some of the business models. So for example, if you figure out your business model is a subscription-based business model, right? Or it's a business model whereby you could get some sort of customer financing, right? Or you could get some sort of upfront licensing from your customer. So you could get cash into the door. So you may not need to get any angel financing at all because you don't want to dilute yourself. You don't want to cede control of the company to an outsider, right? And moreover, if you're able to prove some of those subscription or a purchasing order of some sort, banks may actually finance you very quickly, right? So I would recommend you to consider bank financing before you go into angel financing because there's a lot of pros and cons of getting angel financing.
Our main sponsor is a bank, Hawaii National Bank over here.
Oh. Great, yeah, so I'm promoting bank financing.
Yes.
But the con of getting bank financing is
Okay.
that,
Those are yours.
and please let me know if you disagree, is you often have to pledge collateral to them. Is that correct? He's nodding his head, yeah. So that means home equity, right, or a co-signer of some sort. So that's one of the cons. But if, and I was talking to a bunch of food companies just now before we started this session, and some of these food companies are telling me that they're getting orders from the Whole Foods, right, or Walmart or whatnot. Now, if you have purchase orders, you can bring the purchase orders to the banks, and they will be able to finance against that. Is that correct? Yes. So that will be the first financing source that I would strongly encourage you. And then the next source of financing is obviously angel financing, right? And this is somewhat tough. I think the reason why I say it's tough is because this angel financing, you're basically raising money from anonymous people like me that you've never met before, right? And it requires some level of networking to get that kind of financing. And moreover, that angel financing comes with a lot of bells and whistles. So you have to give away control. Sometimes angels want to be on the board of the companies, or they want to be an advisor. And what that means is that they would have to they might want to have influence over how you run your company. They may disagree with how you run a company, and you just have to add another level of constituents, another level of confrontation that you have to deal with down the road, right? So it's not all that rosy in getting angel financing. Now, typically the kinds of companies that would raise money from angel financings are what I call companies that are, especially in Silicon Valley, that are pre-venture financing, right, Series A. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of these angels, what their purpose is that they know that the capital that they provide you will not be the last capital, right? And that they would have to, what I call, feed you to another venture group for Series A financing. So the hurdle is that much higher, right? So as an angel investor myself, I very frequently have to ask very challenging questions such as, all right, so you want to raise $500,000 from my group. How are you going to spend this $500,000, right? What milestones are you going to achieve? And why should I believe that once you achieve these milestones, you're able to get financing from Kleiner Perkins or Sequoia for Series A? Right? So these are some of the very challenging questions that you have to address before you get angel financing. And what that means is that you may have to write a business plan to raise angel financing. And I say that because angel financing today is actually very different than angel financing 10 years ago. angels are getting much, much more sophisticated today because they are actually expecting that you will be able to eligible for Series A financing in X number of months or X number of years. So they want to be sure that when you finish using the money that they give you, that you're eligible to be financed by another venture funds. So when they deliver the business plan, they expect you to execute on that business plan. In other words, there's no experimentation. The experimentation money is actually from your friends and family. When you get angel financing, you have to execute against your business plan.
So you actually covered a lot of the things that were in the following questions. They were more along the lines of how do you make sure that you have a presentation that has all the pieces that an angel is looking for. How do you prepare? What is an investor-friendly pitch? And those are all the things that you had touched upon. Is there anything else you want to add to that topic?
Yeah. So very frequently, I've seen some pitches where it's like, 40 slides or 50 slides because they feel like they want to give me a lot of information, right? But that's actually not how it works. So when you go into an angel financing process, there is a screening process, right? Typically, in the before you go through the screening process, the angel groups will ask you to submit an application package. And the application package typically consists of one-page executive summary, as well as a slide presentation, right? And I always emphasize to a lot of entrepreneurs that you actually do not have the opportunity to verbally pitch to the angel group during the screening process. That's all you have is that one executive summary and a slide presentation, right? So you have to make sure that your materials are very self-explanatory. And so what that means is that I would strongly recommend all these materials to be pre-screened by someone else, a friend, not your colleague, not your staff members within your company because they know your company really well, they know how to speak a jargon, but you want to essentially have someone else who is not an industry expert to review those materials to make sure that they are understandable to the everyday person, right? So as far as the slide presentation go, I always strongly recommend less is more, short is sweet. And for Berkeley Angel, we always love the Guy Kawasaki 10-page template. I don't know whether people here know who he is. He's a former Apple, one of the, I think, original people at Apple, preeminent angel investor in the Bay Area. He has a 10-page slide. I recommend that you Google that. And that 10-page slide essentially captures all the key topics that angel investors look for.
Deal flow in Hawaii is very strong, and it's very different from the environment that we have here.
So the one in Hawaii is strong.
The deal flow in California, sorry. What advice do you have for companies here that are trying to raise on the West Coast?
Right. So I think the key advice is nothing really beats networking, right? Because as you correctly pointed out, you're in Hawaii, which is somewhat isolated. I mean, isn't it a statistic that Hawaii is actually one of the most isolated places in the world, right? So it's somewhat isolated, right? So what that means is that if you want to get capital from outside of Hawaii, you need to do a lot of networking, right? Now, you have tremendous resources out here, as I had mentioned. You have the Blue Startups. I would strongly encourage would-be Hawaiian companies to apply to the Blue Startups because every time I go to visit a new cohort in the Blue Startups, I'm actually quite surprised that a larger percentage of the Blue Startup companies are outside of Hawaii. And I'm not quite sure why. Maybe Sarah, you can explain to me offline later on. I mean, I've seen companies from as far as last year when I visited, there was a company from Singapore, right? And then there's a company from Israel, right? And I don't even remember meeting companies from Hawaii at a Blue Startup. So I think Luke's company is probably the only Hawaiian company I've ever seen before, I think. So I would strongly recommend you all to apply to Blue Startups. And the thing about applying to accelerators is that you can always reapply. So if you fail, ask for feedback and then reapply again, right? And then you also have the Hawaiian Angels. They meet very frequently as well. I would recommend that you network with the Hawaiian Angels as well, because a lot of the people, my understanding, a lot of people in Hawaiian Angels actually have a lot of connections with the mainland. So that's how you can get introductions, right? But likewise, I mean, there are always people like me who come over here who want to be involved and who have connections to the mainland that you should try to get to know. I mean, at the Blue Star, when I was there are a bunch of people from Google, I think, that I met. So these are the kind of people that you want to network with. One more thing.
Yes.
One more thing is, and I don't know whether it's everybody from UH or some of you have your degrees from the mainland. Increasingly, a lot of major universities have alumni groups that have angel groups as well. So I would also recommend that if you graduate from a mainland university, to get connected back there with the angel groups. In fact, UH, I just found out today, UH has an accelerator program too.
I'm going to ask you one more set of questions, and after that we'll either open it up or wrap up and have drinks and food. But this is my favorite set of questions.
Oh, okay.
So this is of all of the pitches that you have heard. Okay, of all the pitches that you have heard, and keep this list in your mind.
Yeah.
What's the best one? What's the worst one? What's the funniest one? The most unexpected one,
Wow.
and the most maddening one. Okay, and then I'm assuming that there are lessons hidden in each of these.
Yeah.
So let's start with the first one. What's the best one you've ever heard?
Yeah. I think the best pitch I've ever heard is actually one from an Israeli company. So I was at a Berkeley engineering event, and I met this individual who is an entrepreneur who is from Israel, and he actually was from the Israeli military Air Force. So he approached me and said that, and told me, so the reason why this is best is because he has this elevator pitch that totally just captured my attention right away. So he approached me and he said, "Hi, my name is David Hammer, right? And I work for Biozur. I'm from the military Israeli Air Force, and I have a team that is from Waze, W-A-Z-E. Some of you guys can use that for traffic. Yeah, my team is from alumni from Waze who just got bought by Google for $2 billion or something like that, right? And I have a technology that can do location-based service, and I've already raised almost $2 million in financing, right? So I think that's the best elevator pitch I've ever heard because he just captured my attention. So just listen very carefully about everything that he just said, right? He has a team that's from Waze, so that is track record, check, right? And he said that he's from Israel, military technology, and I know that a lot of good companies actually came from discoveries made within Israeli military technology. I just happen to have his knowledge, right? So that checked the box as well. And then he also said he's raised almost $2 million from, he rattled down a couple of private investors whose names I recognize. So that checked the box also. That just totally captures my attention. And the fact that a group of preeminent investors have already given him $2 million just give him so much credibility, right? So the lesson here is always have your elevator pitch, right? Because you never know who you're going to meet, and you want to be able to make sure that you have that 4 or 5 bullet points that you want to capture that attention, people's attention right away. And out of that, I got his business card, and 8 months later, I eventually invested in his company as well.
What's the worst?
I think the worst pitch I've seen, and this is not a pitch per se, is a company that I have been following for quite some time. And this is a company that is started by a Stanford electrical engineering PhD student who has a lot of, brain power, right? Significant brain power. And the reason why it's the worst is because so he came to me with talking about his business idea, and he was telling me about how he has spoken to a couple of prospective customers who have indicated interest in his product, and he has done a couple of pilots with them as well. But when I asked further about some of the metrics that he had accumulated from the pilot, what I uncovered was that yes, he has all these pilots, but the pilot customers are actually not actively using his products, even though he supposedly have all these active pilots with them. So I probed a little further and was really confronting him about, well, why are they not using your products? How much are you charging them? What is the value and what are the metrics that you're using to measure your value that you're delivering to your pilot customers? He doesn't have any answers to me. The only answers he has is that, but these customers told me they like the product and they want to use the product, right? So to me, that is probably one of the worst encounter or pitch with an entrepreneur. And the reason why, and the lesson learned and the reason why is because very frequently as entrepreneur, and I fall into that trap myself when I started the biotech company, is we become so obsessed with our idea that we don't know what the outside world is telling us about our product and services, right? In this particular case, my suspicion is that the pilot customers, if they're not using it, even though he's providing the product, the pilot product for free, is telling him that his product might not be delivering as much value to them, right? He even told me that he's willing to give the product for free and worry about the revenues later on. But then when I push him further, he said, all right, fine, I'll charge him $100 a year. Now that is absolutely ridiculous because I'm asking you, if you go out to Kleiner Perkins and say that you have a product from a Stanford PhD electrical engineering student and you're charging $100 a year, do you think you'll ever get VC financing, right? So the lesson here, there's a lot of lessons in this particular kind of worst pitch question that you have, is that always be very clear about your value proposition to your customers, and B, don't be afraid of admitting that it doesn't work, right? Because one of the key hallmarks, and this is something I learned from business school as well, one of the key hallmarks of successful entrepreneurs is to fail early, fail cheaply, fail very quickly, right? Because one of the two most valuable things as an entrepreneur is capital and your time, right? Because in this particular case study, he's been with these pilots for 6 months already. And nothing really has progressed or developed. So fail cheaply, fail quickly, and fail fast is what I would advise people to have.
And don't lie.
Well, no, more importantly, don't lie to yourself,
Oh,
right? Don't lie to yourself about what value your product is truly delivering to your customers, right? And what I told him is that it's okay to admit that it's not delivering values, but then that means that it gives you the license and the time to go out and do version 2.0, right? Instead of just running around in circles and in this product that probably doesn't work.
Funniest?
This is a tough one though. I don't have an answer for that. I thought very long and hard about funniest, and I don't have a funniest one. And I want to say that, and I really mean it sincerely, because I feel that entrepreneurs who have come to us, this is their life's work, and that is what I really respect about entrepreneurs, right? And even though there are flaws to their pitches, in many cases I don't find them funny because I respect that this is their life's work, right? So I don't really find that there's anything funny or not funny about it, but rather, if I find that there is a flaw, I would try to help them to navigate through those flaws. Yeah.
It's a good man.
Well, I have to be respectful. I've gone through that process before, and I don't want people to be laughing at my idea 15 years ago when I had this crazy idea, right?
But what about most unexpected?
Yeah, I think the most unexpected pitch that I would that I've seen is actually one from Blue Stars.
Mm-hmm.
So there's this young man from USC who I met, and basically, and I don't know, what do I call myself? I'm not a millennial, so Gen something, X or Y or something. I don't know, right? Huh?
I think you're
X.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, yeah, so maybe I'm Gen X, right? So I have this millennial, 20-something-year-old, right, came to me and in Blue Startups and gave me a presentation about this like social media kind of idea that I just went over my head, right? So what is this? I don't understand, and I don't even use. I actually don't use Instagram. I use Facebook, but I don't use Instagram, right? So tell me about all these Instagram jargon, and I pretty much kind of wrote it off right away, right? But then subsequently, I met him again, and he was showing me all these numbers, right? And he's like, look, Sutanto, I launched this product in February of this year, And then I met him in May. Yeah, that was the last time he came to Hawaii in May. So from February to May, he has 250 registered users, right, with very little capital, right? So that really raised my eyebrows, right, because that is tremendous growth. So that was one of the most unexpected kind of company that I've seen. And I then sat down with him to try to take out my millennial, Gen X, Gen Y hat off and try to be a millennial and try to understand what he's trying to do. And I later uncovered that what he was trying to do was actually brilliant, right? And something that was completely unexpected. And the lesson is more of a lesson learned for me rather than for the entrepreneurs is that as an investor, especially older generation investor, I have this notion of how businesses should be, and I did not open up my mind to potentially growing industries that I've never heard of before. And I should have done that in my first meeting, but fortunately he reached out to me again the second time, so that had given me the opportunity to help him out and helping him raise money.
So that's the lesson maybe, that he reached out to you again.
That's right, yeah. Well, he reached out to me, but also I think one lesson for him, and this is something that I share with him was, his name is Dylan, you may know Dylan, I say, hey Dylan, so what you have to understand is, if let's say, Mark Zuckerberg come to us 15 years ago, right, we'd be like, okay, right, you don't see that vision as an older generation investor, right? So, but what I told Dylan was that one lesson for you is you might want to tone down and dilute your pitch to something that's understandable to the everyday person. Because remember, many of your angel investors are actually baby boomers, I think, right? Is that what they call them?
Yeah.
Baby boomers, right? Because the biggest wealth that's controlled by the biggest wealth controlled in America right now is by the baby boomers, right? So, and it's very frequent when you go to all these angel groups. On average, these people are probably 50 to 60. Sometimes I've seen 70-year-olds as well. On Monday we went, there was a 70-year-old doctor there, right? So they may not understand your pitch, but if you're raising money from them, it's your responsibility to communicate to them effectively, right? So one key lessons about pitching, especially when you're pitching a highly innovative idea, is to know your audience and make sure you speak their language so that they understand what you do.
There's one more. I don't know if it'll work. The most maddening.
Yeah,
Yes.
I think the most maddening one is probably the one that is the worst. Yeah,
okay.
the one that, and it's maddening only because I feel that he's not willing to confront the facts and the reality, right? I'm an engineer by training, right? So I'm very data-driven. Every decision that I make had to be based on data, right? But as you get older, maybe you do a little bit of intuition, but most decisions by data. So for him, there's no data that the product is working, but at the same time, there's no data that the product is has any value as well. And he's not, the most maddening thing for me is that he's not willing to generate the data to prove me wrong. I told him, if you have so much conviction, then show me the data to prove me wrong. Tell me, why don't you go ask your customer how much they're willing to pay for this product? And I know that's a very scary question, but he's not willing to do that, right?
Do we need to open it to Q&A? Does anyone have any questions? Let's bring it up here.
My name is John Wallenstrom. I'm curious, and I was working, so I didn't hear the beginning of your talk, but if you've answered this, you can skip. What are your return parameters? What do you look for? How do you end up working with the startup?
Okay, yeah. So good question on return parameters, because that's something that we struggle with as well in angel groups. So, and we have a lot of discussion amongst ourselves at Berkeley Angel. The one thing that we have acknowledged as a group is that we will never be able to find the next Google or the next Facebook, because all these successful, highly ultra successful companies are reserved for the top tier blue chip venture capital firm, right? Those deals will never be shown to us. So we acknowledge that. So we're not looking for the $1 billion exit, right? Rather, what we're looking for are companies that we can potentially have, 40 to 50 million, maybe 25 to 50 million dollar kind of valuation and exit eventually. So that's That's what we're looking for. And a couple of reasons why. A, because we feel that this is the area where we can compete, right? So as in being an entrepreneur, you want to play in a sandbox where you can compete. So as an angel group, we can compete in those deals that we believe are not going to be the Google, because we will never be able to compete on that. And in terms of the returns profile, so typically the valuation range that we invest in is anywhere between, I've seen as low as $2 million to $5 million. So if we're looking for a $25 to $50 million exit, then we're looking for a 5 to 10x kind of exit potential.
Over how many years? Yes.
So this is a good question. We generally, in this particular market, right, most of the exits in this market is not from IPO, right? As we have known, the IPO market really has shrunk dramatically, right? The bar to become an IPO company has become higher and higher for a variety of reasons. So we are actually counting on M&A as exit, right? And we are looking generally, 3 to 5 year time frame, right? And as we know, a lot of the large companies like the Google, the Facebook, they're very, very aggressive in making all these small acquisitions. And the main reason why they're doing that is because, believe it or not, right? I've spoken to a lot of the Google and Facebook people. They themselves are also facing a lot of uncertainty as well. They don't know what is the next new technology that's going to overtake them, right? So, for example, a few years ago, one of the most criticized deals that Google has ever done is actually YouTube, right? People are, why do you buy YouTube? Nobody understood why they bought YouTube. They probably didn't even understand why they bought YouTube. YouTube turned out to be a great success, right? And when I spoke to some of the Google people, the reason why they bought YouTube is because they don't know, and they don't want to miss out, right? So that's actually a very good environment for early stage investors like us if you're targeting the $25, $50 million exit, because those are what I call very small exit that big companies can easily swallow in a very short period of time. And then in terms of what we look for, I think probably the typical stuff, big market, all the typical stuff that you can think of. But generally, there are 2 or 3 things that I personally look for, right? One is that individual is passionate about what they're doing, right? And I know this sounds like cliche, very like, MBA, like, oh yeah. But it really matters a lot because the entrepreneurial journey is very long, arduous, checkered with a lot of uncertainty, mishaps, and I've gone through all those ups and downs, periods of depression as well, right? And you need to have passion and really believe in what you're doing to sustain yourself through this very dark, ugly periods, right? I mean, when I started my biotech company, it was horrible. I put in my own money. I got bait and switched by venture capital firm, right? And then I had to put even more money. I mean, it was horrible, right? But I believe in what I did. I believe in the product that I was developing, right? So passion. The second thing I look for is expertise as well, right? I think very frequently we see all this Inc. magazine that so and so stumble upon an idea, right? From what I've seen, that kind of stumble upon an idea is actually very, very rare, right? I mean, to start a company, you have to be, you have to have an expertise in some area, in that particular area that you're starting a company on. Typically, the best candidates are someone like, a junior product manager who's been at Google for 5 years, right? He knows this Google search or whatever something very well, right? He pitched it to the upper management, they don't want to do it, right? He's been at Google 5 years, he can't see himself getting promoted, he wants out. And he wants to do this thing that Google doesn't want to do, right? And he has expertise in that particular area, right? Those are some of the best candidates that we like to see. You have a third question?
No.
Yeah.
You get it.
Anybody else?
You mentioned, you mentioned for presenting a pitch, the Guy Kawasaki 10-slide pitch deck, and resources for that in order to master your initial pitch. As far as elevator pitching, rapid, like what you had been speaking about before, what recommendations do you have for us so that we can master our elevator pitch?
Well, you know what? nothing beats practice. I know it sounds a little bit cliche, right? So, and the best way is to practice with your friends and family to say whether they in fact believe in your elevator pitch or not, right? So I would recommend you do that. And then the other thing about elevator pitch is to be thoughtful, right? About what is it that's going to grab people's attention. So typically, I would not say things like, oh, this is a big market, right? I mean, of course it has to be a big market, otherwise why would you spend your life's work dealing with it, right? So it has to be like a twist. So you have to figure out what that twist is, right? And in that particular Israeli company, the twist was he has a team that's done it before, and the twist was he has raised $2 million from a few private investors who are very well known in the valley.
I have a question. So you said Blue a number of times, so it sounds like you have a little bit of heart-on for them. And you say you come here like 4 or 5 times a year, so I'm curious in your time that you've been here, you ever just walk through like Chinatown, downtown, Waikiki, and saw a business that you were like, this is interesting, I'm interested in doing some investment out here. Like, have you done anything on your own in Hawaii before?
I have not. I love to do that, but I think one of the things about Blue is that it's pre-screened already. So for my job, it's easier to kind of assess those companies. But what are you trying to get to when asking a question? Is there more?
I'm just curious if you've done business in Hawaii on your own, or you thought, this is a wonderful thing I saw, a really cool thing I liked, it was interesting.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So if you're judging Hawaii based on Blue startups, that's really awkward.
Yeah. That's actually a good question, because that is and I'm going to answer it because I talked to Sarah about it a lot as well, and that is, Sarah, what is a competitive advantage coming out of Hawaii, right? And Sarah and I really talked several times about, Sarah, I really like the Honolulu Cookie Company or some of the Kona Coffee Company, right? So these are all like companies that Hawaii has a very distinct competitive advantage, right? So to answer your question directly, yes. When I look at some of these, more consumer lifestyle, the whole concept of exporting the Hawaiian lifestyle type of companies, I've thought about, this could be a bigger company than they are today. In fact, I've known like the Island Vintage or Honolulu Coffee Company, they have expanded to Japan. You were the one that told me that, I think, right? So yes, I've thought about that. And I've asked Sarah to introduce me to some of these people, but they are already well established and well capitalized as well, right? So they would not need me, they probably would need the banks to finance those businesses for them, right?
So you mentioned how, so let's say they have the metrics, they raise money from their grandma and they have the expertise. What are the common reasons of the companies you founded fail? What are the common reasons why they fail?
Why companies fail, even though they have reached their metrics?
And raise money from their grandma.
Oh my gosh. I can tell you right now, there are 2 major reasons why companies fail, right? One is obviously out of money, right? We all know that. The number one reason that I've seen again and again, not only in startup companies, but also in public companies that I have invested in, is co-founder issues, management issues, disagreements, right? And I have been involved in companies where co-founders fire each other, they can't disagree with each other, right? And it got really ugly, or they backmouth each other, right? Or they backstab each other. That really is the number one issue why companies fail, right? And how do you resolve that? You resolve that by, as a founder, from day one, set the rules of engagement for what the culture of the company should be. And the most important thing, and I've worked in large corporations before, right? The number one thing that disintegrates any organization is how do you resolve disagreements, right? I mean, we all disagree even with our parents, right? Let alone our coworkers, our co-founders, right? But the most important thing is how do you resolve disagreement, and how do you make disagreements non-personal, and how do you actually, through disagreement, find the best solution, right? And people often forgot about that, and they get overcome by their ego, and that's really the number one issue that why companies fail. And when that gets ugly, investors, I don't want to touch the company, right?
Well, thank thank you.
Thank you.
We've got a lot to drink, a lot to eat, and he's going to be here, so you guys can all stay and ask your questions and interact. And it's a smaller group today, so everyone does have a chance to get to know each other. I think this is a really interesting group. Sarah's looking at me like she wants to say something. Well, I did want one of the sponsors to come up should they want to say something. Yes? Oh, but thank you. We've got two big sponsors.